The black convoy moved through Jinju like something that did not belong there. 3 vehicles, tinted windows, sole plates on narrow streets that had never been built for motorcades. Streets where grandmothers still hung laundry on lines strung between houses, where children drew chalk games on the pavement and left them there for days, because nobody in Jinju was in enough of a hurry to complain. The convoy moved through all of it slowly, carefully, like a man in an expensive suit trying not to touch anything. In the middle car, Kang Jiwoo sat with his eyes closed and his hands very still in his lap. He had not slept. Not properly. Not since the call had come through at 2:17 in the morning, his father's doctor's voice measured and careful, in the way that doctors are careful when they are telling you something that cannot be softened. A stroke. Significant. If Jiwoo wanted to say goodbye in any meaningful sense, the doctor had said, he needed to come now. Now had meant standing up from his desk on the 48th floor of the Kang Group Tower in Seoul, where he had been in the middle of merger negotiations that 3 continents of investors were watching. It had meant telling his chief of staff to cancel everything. It had meant getting into a car and driving south through the pre-dawn dark of a city that never stopped moving, toward a place he had spent 6 years not returning to. Home. The word sat in the center of his chest like something swallowed wrong. The car slowed. Jiwoo opened his eyes. They were on the old road. The one that curved along the river before it opened into the estate grounds. He knew every turn of it without thinking. His body remembered it the way bodies remember things the mind has tried to forget. The particular lean of the car around the second curve. The way the river appeared through the trees on the left side for exactly 4 seconds before the tree line closed again. The smell of the water and the autumn and the particular cold of Jinju in October that was different from Seoul's cold in ways he could not have described to anyone who had not grown up here. His security chief spoke quietly from the front seat, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of a man who had learned that his employer did not appreciate alarm. He said that there was someone at the gate. Jiwoo leaned forward. The estate gate stood exactly as he had left it 6 years ago. Black iron. Stone pillars his grandfather had built by hand in 1962, each stone chosen and placed over the course of an entire summer. The persimmon tree that had grown through the left side of the fence over decades, its roots cracking the stone in a way his grandfather had refused to have repaired, because, the old man had said, some things were stronger than the structures built to contain them. And beside that tree stood a woman. Her back was half turned to the road. Her arms were wrapped around herself against the autumn cold in the automatic way of someone who has learned to be their own warmth. Her hair was longer than he remembered, or maybe he was misremembering. 6 years had a way of blurring the edges of things a person was not supposed to think about. Jiwoo's hand moved to the door handle. He was not aware of deciding to move it. Then he saw the child. A little girl, no older than 5, standing just in front of the woman with both small hands wrapped around the iron bars of the gate. She was peering through them into the estate grounds with complete absorption, the focused intensity of a child looking for something she had been told existed but had never been allowed to see. She wore a red coat. Her hair was in 2 uneven pigtails, the kind a child makes herself when her mother isn't watching, full of good intention and approximate execution. The convoy stopped. And as if she felt the weight of something on the other side of the tinted glass, the little girl turned around. Jiwoo's breath left his body. Her eyes were his. Not similar. Not reminiscent of his in the way people use the word when they are being polite about family resemblance. Not the way someone at a dinner party might say that a child has her father's nose, meaning only that the nose is not entirely her mother's. They were his eyes. The exact shape. The exact depth of color. The particular quality of stillness in them that his own mother had called the Kang stare when he was small. The look that had made his teachers uncomfortable and his opponents in boardrooms shift in their seats. The look that said, I see you. I am calculating. I have already decided more than I am showing. That look, in the face of a 5-year-old girl he had never seen in his life. She was studying him through the tinted glass of the car window with complete calm, the way children study things that interest them, without self-consciousness, without the social training that tells adults to look away. She tilted her head slightly to the left. It was a gesture so precisely his own that Jiwoo felt it in a place beneath his ribs where he had not felt anything in a very long time. The woman turned then, following her daughter's gaze toward the convoy, and the last piece of it fell into place with the slow, terrible inevitability of something that has always been true. Kang Jiwoo, who had negotiated with men who kept guns on the conference table, who had walked out of courtrooms at 28 with charges dismissed and his composure not only intact but deliberately visible, a performance of control for the cameras waiting outside. Who had not cried at his mother's funeral 8 years ago because he had not known how and had not allowed himself the time to learn? Kang Jiwoo could not move. Because the woman at his family gate was Seo Yuna. Seo Yuna, who had left Seoul 6 years ago with nothing but a letter. A letter he had read until the paper went soft at the folds. A letter that said, in her precise and careful handwriting, that she loved him enough to disappear and that she was asking him, please, not to look for her. He had not looked for her. He had told himself for 6 years that this was respect, that he was honoring her choice, that love, sometimes, was knowing when to let go. He had built that story carefully, stone by stone, the way his grandfather had built the pillars of the gate, and he had lived inside it until it had become something that felt almost like the truth. He understood now, with the absolute clarity of a man who has just been shown the exact shape of everything he has been wrong about, that he had simply been a coward, that the story he had told himself was not respect. It was relief. The relief of a man who had been given permission to do the easier thing and had taken it without examining why it was easier or what it was costing. The car door opened. He did not remember deciding to open it. The autumn air hit him, cold and carrying the particular compound smell of Jinju in October. River water and persimmon and wood smoke from somewhere up the hill, and underneath all of it, underneath everything, the specific cold mineral smell of the stone and iron of the gate that he had grown up running his hands along. Yuna's face, across 12 meters of gravel road, went completely still. The little girl looked up at him with those impossible eyes. She tilted her head again. That gesture, his gesture, hers now. And she said something. She said it in the simple, direct voice of a child who has not yet learned that some observations are better kept to oneself. She turned to her mother and said that the man looked like her. That was where Kang Ji-woo's carefully ordered world ended. And something else, something he did not have a name for yet, began. Before we go any further, where are you watching this from right now? Drop your country in the comments. I want to see how far this story has traveled. He stepped out of the car. In 12 years of leading the Kang group, Jiwoo had never once walked into a room without knowing exactly what he would say and how he would say it. He had prepared for every conversation he had ever had that mattered. He had rehearsed positions and anticipated objections and mapped out the emotional terrain of negotiations before they began, the way a general maps territory before committing forces. He had never been caught without something prepared. He had nothing now. Yuna did not run. That was the first thing he registered, and it told him something he needed to know about what 5 years had made her. She stood her ground with the particular stillness of a person who has been through something enormous and come out the other side, understanding that flinching only makes it worse. She stood at the gate of the estate that had been part of the architecture of her worst year, and she did not step back. She watched him cross the 12 meters of gravel between them, and she did not move. Her daughter stayed close to her leg, One small fist curled into the fabric of Yuna's coat. But the little girl was watching Jiwoo with open curiosity rather than fear. She had her mother's composure and her father's eyes, and she was using both of them on him with complete unself-consciousness. They said each other's names. Just that. His name from her mouth, her name from his. And the 6 years between those two names was audible in both of them. The weight of everything unsaid sitting inside the syllables like water and stone. The little girl looked between them with the alert attention of a child who understands that something important is happening, even if she cannot name what it is. She asked her mother, in a voice that carried clearly across the quiet courtyard, why the man was looking at her that way. Yuna put her hand on her daughter's hair and said that he was surprised. Just surprised. Her voice was steady. Only someone who had spent 2 years learning. The particular frequencies of her voice would have heard the thing underneath the steadiness. The thing that sounded like controlled breathing, like a person managing themselves very carefully. Jiwoo heard it. He had always been able to hear it, even now. A staff member showed Yuna and the child inside out of the cold while Jiwoo went upstairs to his father. The sick room was on the ground floor now. The stairs had become impossible sometime in the last year, another thing that had changed while he was not here. Medical equipment occupied the corner of the room with the quiet authority of necessary things. The smell of it was the smell of illness managed but not resolved, clean and chemical, and underneath those things, something older and heavier. His father lay in the bed, and he was smaller than Jiwoo remembered. That was the first thing. The stroke had taken something from the physical architecture of him, some quality of presence that had always made him seem larger than his actual size. He was a smaller man now. But his eyes, when they found Jiwoo's, were completely clear, aware, present in a way that the rest of him was not. Jiwoo sat beside the bed and took his father's hand and said that he had come. The old man's fingers tightened around his briefly, and then his eyes moved. Not to his son's face. Past it. To the window. Jiwoo turned to follow the direction of his father's gaze. Through the glass, in the courtyard 2 floors below, Yuna was helping her daughter out of the red coat. The little girl was already pulling away, drawn immediately and irresistibly to the persimmon tree at the corner of the courtyard, reaching for the lowest branches with both hands. His father made a sound. It was not a word. The stroke had taken words, had taken the entire apparatus of language and left behind only the raw material of feeling with no way to shape it. But the sound carried everything a word would have carried. It carried recognition. And underneath, recognition, something heavier. The weight of a man who has been waiting for a specific moment to arrive, and is now watching it arrive, and understanding that it is too late to change what preceded it. His father already knew about the child. Jiwoo understood this completely and immediately, the way you understand things that fit into a space that has been waiting for them. He looked at his father and asked, quietly, "How long?" His father closed his eyes. That was answer enough. Jiwoo found Yuna an hour later in the courtyard. Her daughter was conducting a serious survey of the fallen persimmons, moving between them with the methodical purpose of a scientist in a field she has chosen to specialize in. She gathered the best ones in the front of her coat, which she held up like a basket, her face bent over each specimen with evaluating focus. Yuna watched her daughter and did not look at Jiwoo when he came to stand beside her. She had the posture of someone who has already decided what the next few minutes are going to contain and has prepared herself for them. He asked how old the child was. A long pause. The particular pause of someone deciding not what to say, but whether saying it changes something that cannot be changed. 5, Yuna told him. She had turned 5 in March. March. Jiwoo ran the numbers in his mind, and the numbers were not complicated. They arranged themselves with the merciless precision of mathematics. 6 years ago, he and Yuna had ended. 5 years ago, their daughter had been born. The calculation took less than 3 seconds, and what it added up to was a child who had been alive for 5 years, and a man who had been absent for all of them, and all the things those 5 years had contained that he had not been present for. He said it plainly. She had known. When she left 6 years ago, she had already known. She didn't deny it. He asked why. Yuna looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at her daughter, who had just discovered a persimmon of particularly impressive size and was regarding it with the reverence it apparently deserved. And Yuna told him, in a voice that was not angry and not accusing, and was therefore more devastating than either of those things would have been, that she had left because she knew what his family would do to the child, and because she had known that he would let them. She did not say it to wound him. She said it the way you state something you have examined from every angle and found to be structurally sound. A conclusion. A fact. Jiwoo stood beside her in the autumn courtyard and had nothing to say, because somewhere in the place where his certainties lived, something was cracking. And what was cracking was the version of himself he had maintained for 6 years. The version that had told him Yuna left because she chose to. The version that had never asked what she had been choosing between. His phone rang at 4 in the afternoon. A gossip outlet had photographed the convoy arriving in Jinju. Someone on staff, the investigation would identify who later, had leaked information about a woman and child at the estate gate. The photograph was taken from across the road and was grainy and imprecise, but Yuna's profile was visible, and the little girl's red coat was unmistakable. Han Soo-jin had already seen it. Han Soo-jin, whose father controlled the pharmaceutical empire that was 3 weeks from completing its merger with the Kang Group. Han Soo-jin, who had accepted Jiwoo's proposal 6 months ago with the composed efficiency of someone executing a carefully researched strategic decision. She was not in love with him, and they both knew it, and had agreed to proceed anyway, because the arrangement made excellent sense for both families in every measurable way. It was the kind of marriage that his mother had always told him was the only kind worth having. A marriage built on compatibility and mutual benefit rather than the dangerous instability of emotion. She called his personal line, and she was not shouting. She was worse than shouting. She was precise. She told him their wedding was in 4 weeks. She told him every investor, every board member, every journalist who mattered would be watching what happened in those 4 weeks. She told him that whatever this situation was, he needed to handle it. She did not ask about the child directly, but she did not need to. The pause after she said whatever this situation was contained everything that needed to be said about what she had already understood. The call ended. Jiwoo stood in the hallway of his childhood home holding his phone and feeling, for perhaps the first time in his adult life, that the architecture of his existence had been built on assumptions he had never examined. That he had agreed to a wedding and a merger and a life organized entirely around the appearance of control, and that on the other side of the estate's courtyard window, his daughter was lining persimmons up by size, and that these two facts were incompatible in a way he could no longer manage by not looking at them. If this story has already gotten under your skin, subscribe right now. We post stories like this every single week. Hit subscribe and the bell and let's keep going. He found her that evening on the estate steps. She had arranged 12 persimmons on the step below her in a careful line, largest to smallest, and she was studying the arrangement with her head tilted to the left. It was his gesture, his precise, particular, habitual gesture, the one his assistant had once told him he made every time he was evaluating something that required a decision. He had not known he made it until she described it. And now, here it was, perfectly replicated in the posture of a 5-year-old girl he had known for 4 hours. She did not look up when he sat down beside her. She shifted slightly to make room, the automatic hospitality of a person accustomed to sharing space, and then returned her attention to the persimmons. She asked him, without looking up, if he was the person who lived there. He told her he used to. She asked why he had stopped. He told her he had needed to go somewhere else. She thought about this with the gravity of a child who takes all questions seriously. She picked up a persimmon, examined it carefully, set it back in its place. Then she told him, still without looking up, that her Oma said sometimes people left places they loved because they were scared. She looked at him then, directly, with those eyes. She asked if he was scared. Jiwoo looked at this child, his jaw, his eyes, her mother's small hands and her mother's directness, and underneath both of those things, something that was entirely and only Hana. A quality of attention, a patience, a willingness to wait for answers without filling the silence. Something he did not have a word for yet, because he had not had enough time with her to learn her vocabulary. He told her the truth. He told her he thought he had been scared for a long time. She nodded seriously. She understood this. She picked up the smallest persimmon from the end of her line, the one she had apparently saved, set apart from the others for reasons of her own, and she held it out to him. She told him it was for him, because he had come back. Jiwoo took the persimmon from her small hand. Something in the center of his chest broke open in a way that had nothing to do with pain and everything to do with the sudden removal of something that had been held very tightly for a very long time. Act 1 ends with a child handing a man a persimmon and a man understanding, for the first time in 6 years, what he lost when he lost the woman who raised her. Madam Kang Oxen arrived from Seoul at 9 the following morning. She had not come for her husband. The stroke had happened 4 days earlier, and she had dispatched the family doctor with a full complement of equipment and a message that she would arrive when her schedule permitted. She had come now because of the photograph in the gossip column, because of the 3 paragraphs under the headline about Kang Group's CEO returning to his hometown, because of the child. She was 63 years old, and she moved through the estate with the absolute authority of a woman who had spent 4 decades making sure that authority was never questioned. She was elegant the way cold weather is elegant, clean, precise, stripping away anything unnecessary. Her suit was gray, her posture was perfect. Her expression, as she moved from room to room, was the expression of a woman running a rapid and private assessment of a situation she had not been invited to manage, but intended to manage, regardless. She encountered Hana in the breakfast room. Hana was eating toast with the focused pleasure of a person who takes breakfast seriously. She had jam at the corner of her mouth. She was humming something tuneless and cheerful to herself, completely absorbed in the business of the morning, entirely unaware that she was being observed by someone whose assessment of her could shape the rest of her life. Madam Kang looked at the child for exactly 4 seconds. In that time, she registered everything she needed to register: the age, the features, the eyes that were unmistakably her son's eyes, the particular quality of the child's posture that was recognizably Kang posture in its bones. She did not react. Not visibly. She excused herself from the room with a courtesy that was entirely automatic, walked to the garden, and made a phone call. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. Ji-woo, watching from the upstairs hallway, could not hear the words. He did not need to. He knew his mother's body language the way he knew the old road. Without thinking, without having to translate. The set of her shoulders, the occasional small authoritative gesture of her right hand, the way she turned slightly away from the house at certain points, as if adjusting the angle to ensure she could not be lip-read from above. She was already arranging something. He also noticed, and committed to memory, that the staff member who had shown Yuna inside the day before, the one who had seemed helpful and kind, was standing near the garden wall with his phone in his hand, not using it, simply present, waiting for the call to end, ready. He had been reporting to Madam Kang since before Ji-woo arrived, possibly since before Ji-woo had decided to come. He knocked on her door at 10. He told her he needed to understand what had happened. All of it, from the beginning. She let him in. The guest room was small, and she had made it smaller with the organized reality of traveling with a child. Hannah's drawings spread across the desk, a stuffed rabbit placed with care on the pillow, the small red coat hanging on the back of the chair. The evidence of a life that had been built and was being lived without him, fully and in detail. Yuna sat on the edge of the bed. Jiwoo took the chair. They looked at each other with the careful attention of two people who each hold a partial version of a story and are about to discover how the versions fit together. She started at the beginning. 6 years ago, she had been his legal counsel. He knew that part. What he did not know was that his mother had been looking for a reason to remove her from his life for 18 months before she found one. Madame Kang had recognized, long before Jiwoo did, that his relationship with Yuna was not a professional attachment and not a passing interest. She had recognized it as a threat to the future she had already designed for her son. A future that did not include a self-made woman from a provincial city, with no family connections and no understanding of what it meant to be part of the Kang world. She had been patient. She had waited. And then the security breach had given her what she needed. The security breach that had never happened. Yuna had known it was fabricated. She had known it the way you know things that are wrong about you, with a certainty that is personal and immediate and completely useless against documentation that looks real. She could not prove a negative. She could not prove she had not accessed files she had never touched, had not been in a building she had never entered, had not done the thing the altered security footage showed her doing. 3 days before the fabricated breach was presented to the board, Yuna had discovered she was pregnant. She had not yet told Jiwoo. She had been waiting for the right moment. A concept that, she now understood, his mother had made sure would never arrive. Madame Kang had found out through the family doctor, a man who had served the Kang family for 30 years and understood perfectly well where his loyalty resided and what maintaining that loyalty required. She had called Yuna into a private meeting, not a boardroom, not an office. A meeting room with no cameras, no assistants, no record of any kind. A room that officially had never contained this conversation. She had laid the situation out with the calm precision of someone delivering a legal argument they have already won. The child would never be acknowledged by the Kang family. If Yuna attempted to pursue acknowledgement, the family would dispute paternity publicly, and they had the lawyers and the connections and the patience to make that dispute last year's. Yuna's name, already touched by the fabricated security breach, would be dragged through every court in Seoul until it was beyond repair. By the time Hana was old enough for school, their names would be synonymous with a scandal that would follow the child into every room she ever tried to enter. And then Madame Kang had shown her the message, a message that appeared to have come from Jiwoo's phone, in his writing style, with his contact information in the header. A message that said in plain and unambiguous language that the child was not something he could accommodate in his life, that Yuna should be compensated fairly and encouraged to move on. Jiwoo, sitting in the chair across from her, felt something happen in his chest that was not quite pain and was not quite rage. It was more like the sensation of a floor dropping out from under something that has been standing on it for a very long time. He had never sent that message. He told her so. She told him she knew that now. He asked if she had believed it then. She looked at him steadily. She told him that in 2 years of knowing him, she had never once seen him stand up to his mother. Not once. She had watched him reshape business decisions he believed in, cancel plans he had been certain about, silence his own instincts and judgments and preferences every time Madame Kang applied pressure. Every single time, without exception, he had chosen the path his mother had already selected for him. And she asked him, quietly, without accusation, simply as a statement of the reasoning she had used, why she would have believed he would be different for her. The silence that followed was the longest of Jiwoo's life. He had no answer. Not because the question was unfair, but because it was entirely fair. Because the man he had been 6 years ago, before the merger negotiations and the board politics and the accumulated weight of a decade of leading a company, that man would have sat in his office and been told by his mother that this was a difficult situation and that the right thing, the responsible thing, the thing that protected everyone, was to let it go. And that man would have believed her. Not because he didn't love Yuna, because he loved control more, because he had never once been required to choose between those two things and had therefore never discovered what his actual answer was. Yuna had done the calculation on his behalf. She had looked at the evidence. Not the forged message, but the 6 years of evidence she had already collected watching him. And she had made a decision based on the man she knew. The worst thing about sitting in that chair, in that room, with that knowledge, was understanding that she had not been wrong about who he was then, that the only person who had failed to see it clearly was him. Subscribe right now, because what Madam Kang arranged next is unforgivable. Hit that subscribe button and stay with us. His father's nurse found Jiwoo at noon and pressed a folded piece of paper into his hands without explanation or preamble. The old man had been working on it since the previous morning, she said. He had been very determined. Jiwoo unfolded it. 3 words, written in the shaking hand of a man fighting his own body for the ability to communicate. 3 words that had been formed slowly and with enormous effort, and that now sat on the paper with the terrible weight of a confession that has been held too long. I told her. Jiwoo read the words twice. He folded the paper and put it in his pocket and walked to his father's room. The old man was awake, propped against the pillows with the careful arrangement of a person who can no longer manage these things independently. His eyes found Jiwoo immediately as he entered, and what was in them was not the diminishment of illness. It was the complete, unimpaired awareness of a man who has been waiting for his son to come and receive something he has been trying to deliver for too long. Jiwoo sat down. He said it plainly. His father had found out about the pregnancy first, before Madam Kang. He had known, and he had told her. His father did not deny it. He reached for the notepad on the bedside table with his damaged hand, the effort of it visible in every tendon, and wrote one more word. A single word that took him 40 seconds to produce, and that, when Jiwoo read it, explained everything and excused nothing. Legacy. Legacy. The word his father had built a life around. The organizing principle of everything the Kang family had constructed over 3 generations. Every sacrifice, every alliance, every decision weighed against its impact on what would outlast the people making it. His father had looked at the woman his son loved and the child she was carrying and had run the calculation the way he had run every calculation for 40 years, and the calculation had come out against them, and he had handed that calculation to his wife and stepped back. He had handed her a weapon and called it protection. Jiwoo looked at this man, smaller now, diminished, lying in a bed that had been moved downstairs because the stairs had become impossible, and understood that the stroke had not taken the most important thing from his father. The most important thing his father had given away himself, years before the stroke, in a meeting room with no cameras and a phone call to a woman his son loved. A tear moved down the side of his father's face, slow and silent. The first time in Jiwoo's life he had ever seen his father cry. It didn't make the accounting any different, but it meant something. He was still deciding what. Han Soo-jin arrived at the estate at 2 p.m. without warning. She had driven from Seoul herself, which was unusual enough to mean something. She was beautiful in the precise architectural way of people who have constructed themselves with intention. She moved through the estate gate with the calm of someone who has decided, on the drive down, exactly what she is here to do, and exactly how she will do it. She looked at everything with intelligent, cataloging eyes. She made no unnecessary movements. She found Hana in the garden before she found Jiwoo. The little girl was involved in a detailed explanation of her persimmon sorting system, addressed to a young staff member who appeared to be receiving the information with genuine interest. Sujin stopped a few meters away and watched. She crouched down, bringing herself to the child's level, and she studied Hana with the same careful attention she brought to everything she considered important. Then she stood, found Jiwoo, and told him that the child looked exactly like him. She said it as an observation, not a judgment. She was not angry. She told him so directly, and he believed her, because Han Soo-jin had never been a person who performed emotions she wasn't having. What she was clear. She laid the situation out with the same precision his mother would have used, but without his mother's temperature. Their wedding was in 4 weeks. Their merger was contingent on that wedding. Not approximately, not loosely, but structurally and legally contingent. If Jiwoo acknowledged the child publicly, if the story became a scandal, her father would exercise his right to withdraw from the agreement within 24 hours. The board would review Jiwoo's position. Everything the Kang family had built across 3 generations would be at risk. She told him she was not his enemy. She told him she was giving him the opportunity to make the right decision before it became a decision he could no longer make. She told him he already knew what that decision was. He asked what would happen if he didn't make it. Sujin looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at Hana, who had just discovered a particularly remarkable persimmon, and was holding it up for the staff member's inspection with the expression of someone who has found exactly what they were looking for. She told him quietly that if he didn't make the expected decision, he would make the other one, and he would live with it. She left without waiting for his answer. She had given him the information. What he did with it was his. She was, at her core, a practical woman. And practical people do not waste time waiting for answers they have already predicted. Jiwoo stood in the courtyard for a long time after her car left. He watched his daughter show a persimmon to a stranger with the unguarded delight of someone sharing something precious, completely unaware that conversations were happening around her that would determine the shape of her entire life. Don't go anywhere. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Jiwoo is about to face the most important night of his life. Stay with us. The fever came at 9 in the evening. Children's fevers arrive without warning and climb with the speed of something that has been waiting for its moment. Jiwoo heard Yuna moving through the hall, quick and quiet, the particular pace of a parent who has learned to move fast without alarming anyone. And he came out of his room to find her carrying a bowl of cool water toward Hana's door. He fell in beside her without being invited. She told him to go back to sleep. He asked how high the fever was. She told him the number and told him it was manageable and that she had handled this before. The words carried, everything they were meant to carry. She had handled this before. She had handled everything before. 5 years of handling everything, alone, in the apartment above the laundry and in the parks and the school, and the long quiet nights when the child was sick and frightened and the only person there to make it better was her. He said he wanted to help. She looked at him with the exhaustion of someone who has been strong for so long that the offer of help lands like a small generosity that is almost too much to receive cleanly. She told him he could sit outside Hana's door in case the child called. It was the smallest possible assignment. The assignment you give someone you do not yet trust. He took it without argument. He sat on the floor in the hallway of his childhood home in his expensive clothes, with his back against the wall and his knees drawn up, and he listened. At 11, Yuna came out of the room and sat down beside him on the floor. She did not say anything immediately. She leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes with the absolute surrender of someone for whom the floor of a hallway is, at this moment, exactly enough. After a while, she told him something. She told him that Hana sang to herself when she was scared, that she had been doing it since she was 2 years old, that Yuna had never taught it to her, and had never been able to identify where she had learned it. She had simply discovered one day that her daughter, when frightened, sang. Through the door, faintly, they could both hear it. A small voice, tuneless and absolutely certain of itself, singing to keep the dark on the other side of where it was. Jiwoo said it quietly. She had been doing it alone. Every time. Yuna said yes. Every time. He put his head back against the wall and looked at the ceiling of the house he had grown up in and thought about every night like this one that had happened without him. Every fever, every nightmare, every small frightened voice singing in the dark, with no one on the other side of the door but her mother, because her father had not known, and had not known because the truth had been taken from him before he could choose it. He said he was sorry. Not with an explanation attached or a defense or a promise, just the words, unadorned, offered to the space between them in the dark hallway. Yuna did not say it was okay, because it was not okay. 5 years of it was not okay, and both of them knew it, and neither of them was going to pretend otherwise. But she did not move away. They sat together on the floor until Hana's fever broke at 3 in the morning, and the singing faded into the deep, even breathing of a child who has decided the monsters can wait until daylight. The question now is whether understanding is enough to make him someone different. Morning arrived with his phone already burning. His chief of staff called at 7 with the kind of careful, measured delivery that means the news is bad and the person delivering it has already decided how to frame it for maximum manageability. A motion had been filed with the board to review Jiwoo's fitness as CEO. It was being described in the filing language as a personal conduct matter pending resolution. Han Soo-jin's father had issued a private statement to 3 senior board members. Not a public statement? Not yet, but a message clearly intended to be understood as a signal, suggesting the merger timeline needed reassessment. The walls were closing, quietly, with the practiced efficiency of people who had done this kind of thing before and knew exactly how much pressure to apply and where. Jiwoo listened to all of it. He asked his chief of staff one question, whether the motion was binding before he responded. It was not. He had 48 hours. He said that was enough time and ended the call. He sat for a moment in the early morning quiet of the house he had grown up in. Through the window the persimmon tree was catching the first light of the day, its branches bare except for the last few fruit the autumn had left. He thought about a small girl sitting on the steps below it the previous evening, arranging her collection by size, handing him the smallest one because he had come back. He picked up his phone and called his lawyer. He found her in the formal sitting room at 9. She was dressed with the perfection she always brought to difficult days, as if precision of appearance was a form of armor. She had been waiting for this conversation. He could read it in the particular quality of her composure. Not the ordinary composure of a woman at her ease, but the composure of a woman who has prepared a position and is ready to defend it. She had not built 40 years of power and influence by being caught unprepared. Jiwoo sat across from her and placed his phone on the table between them, screen up. His lawyer had worked through the night. Digital forensic records, metadata analysis, the provenance of the message Yuna had been shown 6 years ago. The message that had appeared to originate from Jiwoo's phone. The device it had actually been sent from, his mother's personal phone. The records were clean and complete and unambiguous. Madame Kang looked at the screen. She looked at it for a long time. The expression on her face did not change in any way that would have been visible to someone who did not know her well. Jiwoo knew her well. He saw the single small adjustment that happened behind her eyes. Not surprise, because she had always known this moment was a possibility. Something more like recalculation, the rapid, quiet revision of a strategy that has just encountered unexpected resistance. She did not apologize. She had never apologized for anything in her life, and she did not begin now. She explained. She told him he had been changing, that she had watched it happening and had recognized it as dangerous, that the Jiwoo who had been with Yuna was softer, less focused, more vulnerable to the kind of emotional reasoning that could destroy everything a man in his position had built. She told him she had done what she did because she could see where it was going, and she had a responsibility, not only to the company, but to him, to his future, to the family, to prevent it. Jiwoo told her that she had forged a message from his phone to the woman carrying his child and told that woman he wanted her gone. She told him she had protected the family. He told her she had destroyed his. She stood. Her composure did not crack. It was perfect, and it was, in its perfection, the most terrible thing in the room. The composure of a person who has done something monstrous and has spent 6 years in complete peace with it. She told him what acknowledging the child would cost. The company, the merger, the board, 40 years of work, all of it. He told her he was acknowledging Hana. That day, publicly, that Hana's name was Kang Hana, and she was his daughter, and she would be acknowledged as such whether Madame Kang was standing beside him or not. His mother stared at him. For the first time in 36 years of memory, she had nothing to say. He had finally arrived at the thing she had not prepared for. Not because she hadn't considered it, because she had genuinely never believed he was capable of it. The architecture of her confidence in him had always rested on the certainty that he would choose correctly, by which she meant he would choose as she had chosen, as her husband had chosen, as 3 generations of Kangs had chosen. Legacy over everything. He told her the choice he was giving her. She could be part of her granddaughter's life, or she could maintain her position. Both things were not available to her. He was offering her one. He picked up his phone and walked out of the sitting room. Behind him, his mother remained in her chair. Perfectly still, recalculating. If Jiwoo just did what you needed him to do. Subscribe right now. This is the kind of story we came here for. Hit that button. Let's finish this. He made 3 calls. The first was to Han Soo-jin. He told her directly that the wedding was cancelled. She was quiet for a moment on the other end of the line, and he could hear in that quiet the rapid, unemotional recalculation of a practical woman revising her plans. She told him she had expected it. She told him she had expected it the previous day, when she had seen how he looked at the child. There was no cruelty in the way she said it. She wished him, with what seemed like genuine and unsentimental goodwill, the outcome he was choosing. She hung up without drama. She would find another arrangement. She always did. She would be fine. The second call was to his chief of staff. He dictated a press statement, and he did not use the careful, hedged language of corporate communications. He did not say that he was pleased to announce, or that it was with great joy that he shared. He said simply that he had a 5-year-old daughter named Kang Hana, and that he had not been present for the first 5 years of her life, and that this ended today. He said it plainly in the way of someone who has decided that the only way through a thing is directly through it. The third call was to his lawyer. Full legal paternity acknowledgement, to be filed the same day. And the beginning of the process of clearing Yuna's name. Every implication, every whispered professional suggestion that had followed her out of the Kang group 6 years ago. Every door that had been quietly closed against her. All of it to be documented and corrected and formally retracted. Each call closed a door. Each door that closed revealed that the room behind it had been empty all along, full of things he had believed he needed and could not, it turned out, feel the loss of. By the time he was finished, his phone showed 43 missed calls. He put it in his pocket and went to find Yuna. She was packing. Hana's fever was gone and the morning was bright and clear, and Yuna had decided, with the practical directness that 5 years of single parenthood had developed in her, that it was time to go home. Back to the small apartment above the laundry in Jinju's town center. Back to the life she had built, carefully, stubbornly, room by room and year by year. Without him. Jiwoo stood in the doorway and told her what he had done. She listened without expression. Her hands continued their work, folding Hana's small things with the careful efficiency of someone who has packed this bag many times before. The little red coat, folded last, the stuffed rabbit, tucked into the side where it would not be crushed, the drawings from the desk. He told her about the 3 calls, the canceled wedding, the press statement, the lawyer, the paternity filing. He told her all of it in plain language, without editorializing, without asking her to respond before he was finished. When he was done, she was quiet for a moment. Then she told him what she needed him to understand. She told him that what he had done that morning did not fix what had happened. That 5 years did not disappear because of 3 phone calls, however consequential those calls were. That the distance between where they were now and wherever they might eventually be was real, and she intended to treat it as real rather than pretend it away. He told her he knew. She told him what Hana needed from him if he was going to be in her life. Not grand gestures, not press statements or legal filings or confrontations with boards of directors. Every fever, every nightmare, every ordinary Tuesday when nothing happened and there was no drama and no moment of redemptive clarity. Just the plain ongoing work of showing up for a person because they are yours and you are theirs. That was what being a father meant. That was the only version of it she was interested in offering him the chance to try. He told her, every ordinary Tuesday. Yes. She looked at him for a long time. Outside in the hall they could hear Hana, awake now and recovered, explaining something to someone with her characteristic combination of authority and delight. The voice of a child who has decided the world is interesting and wants everyone else to know it. Yuna told him to start with today. Just today. They would see about tomorrow. It was not forgiveness. It was not a promise of anything beyond the next few hours. It was the small, precise, careful opening of a door that had been closed for 6 years. Opened not wide, but far enough for light to come through. Jiwoo understood that this was the most he had any right to ask for. He understood. Standing in the doorway of that small guest room with his daughter's drawings on the desk and the red coat folded over Yuna's arm, that it was enough. The press statement went live at noon. By 2 in the afternoon, his phone held 212 unread messages. His mother had not called. The board had requested an emergency meeting for Monday morning. 3 journalists had arrived at the estate gate and been politely redirected by the security detail. His chief of staff was managing the public situation with the professional competence of someone who had spent a decade managing crises and understood that some crises could not be managed, only witnessed, and allowed to run their course. None of it entered the courtyard, because in the courtyard, in the afternoon light of an October day in Jinju, Kang Jiwoo was sitting on the estate steps, and his daughter was teaching him how to sort persimmons. She had a system. She had explained it twice already, and she was on her 3rd explanation now, with the patient persistence of a teacher who believes that understanding is always achievable if the instruction is clear enough. There were big ones and medium ones, and a 3rd category that was also medium, but a different kind of medium, and the distinction between the 2 kinds of medium was something she clearly regarded as foundational and non-negotiable. She told him he had to practice, every day, until he knew. She placed a persimmon in his palm with the gravity of someone assigning important work. He held it in both hands and looked at it as if it were the most significant thing he had been given in years. Which it was. He looked up from the persimmon and found Hana watching him with those eyes. his eyes in her face, and she had the expression of someone waiting to see if the student has understood the lesson. The expression of a person who has decided, provisionally, to trust him with something important, and is paying attention to whether that trust is going to prove warranted. He told her he would practice. Every day. She nodded seriously. She turned back to the persimmons. She found another one that required his assessment. This was one of the difficult medium ones, she explained, and he needed to learn to recognize them by weight as well as size, which meant he had to hold it in both hands, like this, and feel the difference. He held it in both hands, like this, and felt the difference. Across the courtyard, Una stood in the doorway of the estate that had been the place where everything went wrong for her 6 years ago. She was not smiling. The distance between where they were and where they might eventually be was real, and she carried it clearly, without pretending it was smaller than it was. 5 years of building a life without him had made her someone who did not minimize real things. But she was watching them. She was standing in the doorway, and she was watching her daughter hand her father a persimmon and explain its importance, and she was letting herself watch, not looking away, not managing herself toward a feeling she had not arrived at yet. Simply present, in the doorway, in the afternoon light, watching the beginning of something she had not yet decided what to call. Jiwoo felt her gaze, from across the courtyard, and looked up. He did not smile. He had not earned a smile yet, and he knew it. But he held her gaze, and she held his, and between them, in the space of a courtyard and 6 years and everything that had happened in them, something passed. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Not a promise of anything beyond the next hour. But acknowledgement. And underneath acknowledgement, something quiet and tentative and careful. Just beginning to exist. That might. Given time and ordinary Tuesdays and every fever and every story at bedtime and every morning that arrived without drama and asked only to be shown up for, that might, eventually, become trust. Hana's voice pulled him back. She had found the most important persimmon in the collection, and she was holding it up in both hands so he could see it properly. She told him there was a lot to learn. She told him it was going to take a while. He turned back to his daughter. He told her he was paying attention. She told him that was the right answer. That was, she explained, exactly where they had to start. He intended to start there. He intended to learn all of it, every day, until he knew. If this story moved you, if any part of Jiwoo's journey felt like something you needed to hear today, subscribe right now. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? And which moment hit you the hardest? Was it Hana singing to herself in the dark? Was it Yuna sitting on the floor at 3 a.m.? Was it the persimmon in his palm? Was it the words, "Every ordinary Tuesday"? Tell me in the comments. Share this with someone who needs a story about second chances today. We will see you in the next one.